Welcome back to This Takes the Cake. I want to say Happy New Year to all of you guys. We're excited about this episode. We have Ashley Huff from Nashville, Tennessee, and we're excited to talk about Ashley. So I know we were just talking before we got started. Tell everybody how we met.
So we met in April of 2021. It was a crazy, busy wedding season.
Right.
And I think it led to like, hey, we need some extra hands this weekend. And I was like, sure, why not? And then, kind of led to us, I think, meeting at your beach house.
Yeah, that's where I remember meeting you. So go back to that as well. So explain to them how you knew my family.
Yes, so I knew Sarah's family through my uncle that worked in NASCAR, which, as you all probably know, Sarah's family's all in NASCAR as well. And it led to Sarah's sister-in-law and was like, oh my gosh, do you know Sarah with Stunning and Brilliant? I was like, I know of Sarah. Trust me, I know of Sarah. And previously, before that, I had tried about getting an internship, but all of the internships at the time in 2019 were taken over or, already booked, whatever.
Already filled, yes.
And yes, and so.
I do remember looking back at that. I was like, and then it rang a bell when I saw the email.
Yes, and I always remember, like, when I would come to the beach with my family is seeing the Hummer, the S&B Hummer.
I love it.
Yeah, that's how long ago I had remembered.
Rest in peace now.
Yes.
Long gone.
Yeah, so, and then, like I said, I knew of S&B, but I didn't know that connection until, Meredith mentioned it, and it was like, oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy?
That's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Just small world type stuff. And then
small world.
Meredith introduced me to Sarah, and Sarah was like, I have a crazy busy weekend at this coming up. And I was like, sure, I don't really have much going on. I was like, I had a degree in event planning and tourism before, so it kind of was aligned with but not necessarily weddings. So it's kind of fell right into the wedding world, and that's where it all started.
Right. And I was like, here's a dress, here's a crossbody bag, here's your clipboard, here's your paperwork.
Here's the timeline, yep.
I'll see you on Saturday.
Literally.
Was the first wedding you worked with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Where was that one?
In Polly's.
Was it outside?
Yes, outside. It was a huge, beautiful tent wedding.
Okay.
That's why I was like, oh, tents can actually be pretty.
I love it. I love it. Right? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're excited. We're going to be talking about preferred vendor list. I think this is a big thing a lot of people always ask about, clients, couples, and also new venues that come into town or new vendors. They're like, who do you like? Who do you trust? Who do you go, who do we go to? So I guess I'll just ask you, like, as a planner, like, why do we have these?
I think the biggest reason for, me being in Nashville is establishing all of those relationships from what felt like the beginning, and creating, and we had those vendor meetings or venue meetings or, through multiple different vendors, but, you can create that and talk about how much we put trust into the vendors and the venues that we, enjoy working with. And then that leads to creating that, list that we have and tend to refer to, and just something as simple as a DJ that might be more, traditional versus a DJ that's, kind of more upbeat club. It's what the client might actually, be leaning towards, and then who to reach out to and see who they're available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, having that vendor list, is definitely our go-to. Those are the people that we would hire for our own wedding, own event. We know who's going to trust, know who's going to show up and do a good job, and don't have to worry, about those things. Obviously you can get on Google and look at the top vendors, but that doesn't always mean they're the best.
Right.
So they may be paying for that Google ad or something,
Yeah.
All right. So what is the difference between preferred and approved vendor? Because I know there's a lot of venues that you can only use their approved.
Yes. And I've ran into that a little bit in Nashville with some of the really big, venues, and their approved vendor list, you show they've done like X amount of number of weddings there, or they have, X amount, of whatever it might be, whether it's insurance or, vendors that they work with a lot. And they want those specific people there for the reason of, they know what size tent goes on this lawn.
They know where the sprinklers are.
Right, yes. It's more established in growth that, you don't have to start necessarily from the beginning like a new venue would be. And that's, I think, like compared to like our preferred vendor list would be something similar to, we're preferred there, but that doesn't mean that we work there exclusively. I guess
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because there's a lot of venues here, you know, you have to use their approved vendors.
Yes.
You know, and sometimes that gets a little tricky, like photographer, you know, things like that. They can fly from out. They don't have to like live here to be a, you know, on the vendor list.
And I think I've ran into that a lot too, is certain venues have, you know, specific people that they only really want you to use. And it almost puts, you know, the client in a bind where they're like, no, I've known this person, you know, I've followed them for whatever the case may be. Yeah. And then we can go through those steps. And we've done that already a couple times just to get into those. And just go through that process.
No. And I always say, you know, as long as they're licensed, insured, you know, all of those things, you know, they should be able to come to any venue. But I know like here, there's some venues, they have exclusivity for like the rentals and the cater just because of the logistics side.
Right.
But you really only have two options, you know, with that. So sometimes you're a little limited if it is an Indian wedding or a Jewish wedding, you know, with the caterers and stuff, it gets a little tricky. So yeah. So how would you say as a planner, obviously, let's just say they were a month of, but we give them our exclusive vendor list and things like that. What do you think's the most helpful with them having that vendor list?
I think it's just working with a couple different previous clients, like here recently, it almost, in a way, narrows down the thousands of choices that they could find, you know, by searching on Google.
You know, could spend days.
Yes, and, you know, get down that rabbit hole, as they say, of like, you know, I want this specific thing, and they can come to us and say specifically, like, hey, you know, I want, like what I was saying about the DJ, you know, I want the DJ that's going to be fun, get people on the dance floor, out of their seats type thing. And we know who to go to for those kind of people. But also if it's more, you know, we want just a laid back kind of like just ceremony music, you know, just have fun, mingle type thing. We know who to reach out to and, you know, create that, you know, connection for them, and then, you know, narrow down the process to help them with their time as well.
No, for sure. And, you know, having that list, let's just say someone recently booked, you know, I'm like, hey, check out our top photographers, videographers, you know, and we've already narrowed that down for them. So I'm like, of these, pick your top three, you know, and that kind of helps the process streamline between us. But then, you know, we always get those other few, they go on their own and start looking up all these other people, which is fine.
Right.
You know, but it definitely already narrows it down. It's like when you get into like paint swatches, like narrow it down to 5 or 6 for me and I'll pick from there. If I have to look at 400, you're not going to get an answer.
And it's very overwhelming for sure.
Very overwhelming. No, for sure. And I'm sure you've ran in this quite a bit. So have we. A couple that wants to use someone outside of the list. Have you had?
Just previously at a recent wedding that we did, we had, they were a month of client and they had brought some.
And month of means we don't pick the vendors.
Right. Yes.
We hope they pick from a vendor list, but.
And they were actually, a destination, so to say. A lot of their family was traveling. They were originally from a different state. And they had brought a photographer from somewhere else. She was amazing. It ended up being perfect. But it was different because, you know, when she flew in, she didn't, you know where the venue was. And we talked through all the logistics of it. She had never been on site. So, you know, she had met there before and, you know, walked the grounds that day. You know, it was like, oh, let's do this here, you know, first look over here. So it worked out. But it also is difficult just because, not necessarily, I guess, difficult, but that, you know,
it puts more added things for you to make sure, because they've never been there, so they want you to walk them through, like, oh, you know, what about this spot, or can we go over here, you know.
Yes,
so it does make more legwork for us, you know, especially like for a DJ or a band. And, you know, I really think if they've never been there, they should plan to arrive the day before.
Yes,
do a walkthrough, make sure they know where everything is, because pulling us away day of, you know, as we're focused on other things,
all the other things, yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably one drawback when they don't pick somebody. Now, I love working with new people, don't get me wrong, but just a little bit more legwork.
And it also like goes kind of back to that trust thing too, because, you know, our vendors that we work with, or even venues we work with so frequently, that we, you know, can feel like we can trust them, that their work will, you know, we can say, well, we know how their work is. You know, we've worked with them before. When they pick their own, you know, venue or vendors that we're not necessarily familiar with, it can be a little difficult because you just don't know what quality you're going to get necessarily.
No, for sure. And you don't know like how they work, you know, those things. No, for sure. Let's see. Is it only planners that have vendor lists?
No. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that different venues, just kind of like what we were saying, they have those preferred vendors and then their approved vendors. And, you know, just like, and we take pride too in trying to get on those other, you know, because of the networking, you know, you get on their list and they get on yours, and it creates that relationship where, hey, you know, I've got a, you know, a client that's already booked me for their DJ, for instance, and they're looking for a planner. Oh, perfect. You know, so it creates that bond and almost friendship in a way, but, you know, that networking, and it really grows your relationship with everyone.
Right. And I've noticed, obviously, venues, they have a lot of theirs. Mm-hmm. I don't know about your venues, but our venues here, I mean, some of those I'll get their vendor list from the venue, and I swear they haven't updated in like 10 years.
Yes.
I like looked at one the other day, I'm like, not in business. Right. Oh my God, heck no. Yeah. Like, update this. And then I was like, I'll be happy to send you ours over. Right. Because sometimes, I mean, the clients are booking the venue before they even, because they don't know where they're getting married. Maybe they're getting married in Chicago or Florida. They find the venue, and then from there, they're like, oh, shoot, I need help.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, some of those.
And that's how here recently, just some of my clients, just when booking with me, they've already found their venue. And then just here recently, we did a venue walkthrough with a client, and, you know, the lady was like, oh my gosh, you know, I would love for you, because now that you've been here, you see the grounds, you know where the tent's going to go, like you said, the sprinklers, those kind of things. And it creates that relationship where she's like, you know, we're booking, you know, 3 weddings a weekend now, and where before, you know, 6 months to a year ago, they didn't have the capacity to do that. So, you know, it grows all those things.
No, for sure. I'm sure you have a lot of stories with this one, and so do I. About hiring friends on your wedding day.
Oh, yes.
Tell me one.
I think a recent wedding, or not necessarily recent, a previous wedding that I worked with here in Myrtle, it was actually a debut.
Love it.
Yes. It was a month of client, like you said, and we did not pick the vendors. And I was at this time just, you know, I was the working on the weekends type thing. And it was a friend of a friend that was the DJ. And I feel like we're talking about DJs a lot, but this specifically. And they show up, and, you know, as us vendors, we like to wear, you know, black on black, just so you could establish us and see where we are, those kind of things.
Professionals.
But, yes, right. Yes, professionals. And this specific DJ had crazy clothes on. There was a whole group of them. And then they had specifically wanted a fog machine for their first dance, which is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they had tried the fog machine before they started. So
I don't think they were good outside either. No, I mean, I know that from not from doing it, but just from watching.
Yes, so it was like multiple things.
It was hot as heck that day.
Yes, and they had played the wrong first dance song. So as you can imagine, even though we had provided them the timeline, you know, went over all the details that day, it was like, you know, it was multiple things that, and a lot of their vendors that day, specifically vendors, were a lot of family friends. And, you know, and then I think at the end of it, I remember you saying, you know, they reached out and was like, you know, this we wish we would have changed, or we wish we would have went with someone else that was not necessarily even more.
The day the wedding cake melted?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They blamed that on us.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Because it was 94 degrees that day, and literally, it was our fault.
Yep. After it had been sitting in the fridge up until right before we took it out.
Yeah, too. And you guys, took one step ahead that the client didn't understand.
Right.
That you could have put it out there when the cake person delivered it. It could have been,
2:00 or whatever.
It could have been really, really pretty.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Lord.
Yeah. Yes, we've all had the weddings with friends. This one definitely takes the cake for sure. So it was a beach wedding. It was at a beach house.
Okay.
And the family was doing all the cooking.
Oh, Lord.
So as you can imagine, I've already explained to them, like, who's going to serve these people? Who's going to clean the plates? Guess who ended up serving and scraping and cleaning all the plates?
S&B.
We did. We do it all.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when friends get involved. Or the most part is when they're a vendor and then they just join the party and they forget what they were having to be there for.
Yes, I had a previous wedding that, thinking of that same thing, that they had not thought through the logistics, and it was a small person wedding, but, you know, at the end of the day, they were, you know, they had quite a few drinks, and it was like, oh, we'll just clean it up tomorrow, as there's, you know, cake smashed on the table. I mean, all these different things, and, you know, it's tough for us because it's hard to just walk away from a mess, especially when we've worked with a venue before, you know, and you don't want, you know, it's very tough because...
Yes, we don't want to leave the venue. Oh, God, wouldn't hire them. They left it in a mess.
Right. So that was like, specifically, we stayed like an hour and a half later that night than what we were originally supposed to be there Just because, you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to burn that bridge with that venue. And, taking that extra step meant a lot for us, even though it was the work of it. But,
Right.
we stood out to the venue.
Did you send her a convenience fee
Yes.
for that?
Oh, yes. The extra hours and convenience.
That's my new word, convenience fee.
Yeah.
That's what we're putting in our contract. It's not a charge or overtime. It's a convenience fee.
Right.
It was convenient.
Yeah.
That you were
Definitely
there.
convenient for them.
And you knew how to clean.
Yeah. We didn't get home till I think like after midnight that night.
Yeah, so I've had obviously several friends, be vendors. There was this one friend, she was going to make a cannoli cake.
Oh.
And she's like, I know how to make it. I'll do it. It'll be great. Like when that thing showed up, I was like,
keyword.
I was like, oh no. No, not good. So we ended up having to go to a local bakery and just buy cannolis.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't let the bride see it.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was so bad.
Oh no.
From the planner side, how important are these vendor relationships with people you trust to be a good fit for the client?
I think going into that, it would be, I like to stay in touch with my, different vendors, whether it's someone that, I might not have talked to for a while, but I've just not, like, for instance, the Chick-fil-A truck, something like that they've reached out, but I don't necessarily have a client for it now, but keep that connection because you never know when that will be. And, if you respond
sooner
to
than
them,
later, I'm
yes,
sure.
Oh, yes. And if you respond
do they bring
to
it on
them,
Sundays?
right?
I thought about that.
Yeah.
When they sent it. I was like,
Yeah. I don't know. But, just different things like that, lead to, and if you stay in touch with them, you learn like different, not necessarily trends, but different things that they do that they might not have done 6 months ago, or, a different color scheme that's, or for instance, a florist that, this flower, is up and coming, and she's like, well, we can add it into this that, would grow, just different things like that. And I think staying in touch with them is definitely really important, but also going to those, different networking events and seeing them out and them introducing you to different people that, for instance, if you have an introvert that's like, oh, I'll go to this networking event, and they end up coming and they're like, oh my gosh, I can finally connect you with, Ashley from SMB events, Nashville,
Right.
Different things like that. It grows. And I think me personally, I think it's very important to stay in contact with all those vendors and venues.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. And when people think of things, like there was not too long ago, a photographer here locally, she thought of me 'cause she's like, I really need to throw a last minute birthday party for my little boy. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And that's what you want that thought to be of that vendor or venue when they think of throwing an event or a party or a wedding, they're thinking of you first. So,
right. And that's what just from previous experience, some of the, different vendors that I've met with early on, they're still referring me, and, it goes a long way because, it's one of those things where if they continue to refer you and you refer them, the relationship's only going to grow, and eventually, someday, it's hard to tell what you could get into together.
No, for sure. All right, this is probably one of my favorite ones. When a client wants a vendor that will not deliver the quality that you expect as a client.
Definitely a tough one.
This happens so many times, and I think I end up booking a lot of couples and clients because I'm real with them. They're like, oh, well, I actually talked to this other planner and she said they were great. And I was like, well, so I'll give an example. So there is a client I just booked, and she booked an older venue that has probably that list that's 10 years old.
Oh, yes.
And just from talking to her on the phone, the mom, I knew that this wasn't just going to be a little sweet and short wedding and 20 people.
Right.
It was going to be over the top. And one of the first things she said to me, she was like, what do you think about this photographer? And she said the name, and then she said, what do you think about this person for hair? And I said, the lady's name, I'll just name her Betty. I said, Betty, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
She was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, that hairdresser, have you looked at their Instagram or their website? I said, those look like prom hairstyles. And from what you showed me of your daughter, she looks like, a little Taylor Swift going on.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to be the right vibe.
Yeah.
And the photographer, OMG, no personality, none of that. And I could just tell they were full of light and personality and everything. And I was like, and I explained, I said, day of, I said, you got to have a photographer that's fun, that can interact and move
so
people
important.
and things like that. she was like, thank you so much for telling me this. Like, I mean, of course, a photographer, you can look at their best 6 photos on their homepage and think, wow. But I said, well, ask for a full gallery.
Right.
So I didn't like say absolutely not. You don't hire these people. And so she requested for a full gallery, and she was like, thank you so much.
Aww.
And then she's like, how do we hire you?
All right. There you go. Yeah.
So sometimes being real, but not like I wouldn't say to somebody, oh, he's terrible, don't hire. You know what I mean?
Not too harsh, but just honest.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, honest and just making sure, and I always say, I just want to make sure I'm putting you, you know, in the right direction of what's a good fit for you.
Right.
So have you had any things come about with vendors or venues or
there's definitely been one specific case that tried to tell the client up front, like, hey, you know, this venue, you know, their communication's not great, their food's not the best, you know. Obviously, those things are really important when you're trying to plan a wedding. And just also some other things. Yeah. Also some other things like, you know, the bar, for instance, didn't have enough staffing and just multiple lists of things. And they went on and I think ended up booking the venue. And then, you know, that led to other issues that came about. And just specifically with the communication thing, you know, that when they're not answering, when we need, you know, an answer back, like, hey, you know, this is their menu and, you know, we're not getting anything back. It leads to stress upon, you know, the client because it's like, hey, you know, I booked them, but I'm not getting in touch. You know, they're not answering me. They're not getting back with me. And it's like, I want to say, kind of told you so, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. Told you so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big thing with venues. Like a lot of these venues, you have to use them for food and bar. Mm-hmm. So you definitely need to go on recommendation and experience from people because there's a lot of venues that don't really have it put together for the food and the bar side. And
the venue might be beautiful and perfect, but you know, if their food is terrible and the communication and the bar and you know all those different things, that's what your guests are going to remember. They're not going to necessarily remember the big beautiful venue and you know whatever the case may be, but those specific things like the food that they ate, that's one thing that I like to tell my clients is splurge on, you know, the food and the alcohol.
Right.
It's what people remember.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or not remember one. I don't know.
Yeah. This actually just made me think of a really good one, talking about try to portray them to not use a certain vendor or venue. And she was a month of. This probably been at least 4 years ago. And I have to tell you what happened at the end, too.
Okay.
So it's a good one. So she uses this local florist here, which I wouldn't even order everyday florals from. Let's be real. Oh. So we talk to this vendor, I think like 1 or 2 times. They tell me the time they're arriving. Mm-hmm. The ceremony was at 4. It was in November, and they were supposed to be there at 1:30. Okay. So it became 1:30, and they were not there.
Oh, my gosh.
So I didn't hire these people. Yeah. I'm not responsible. But at that point, I had to go. I went to Dad. Mm-hmm. Dad was cool. I knew Dad would make sure everything would happen. I went to Dad and said, listen, florist isn't here. No one's answering. We need bouquets. We need boutonnieres. We need all these things. And he said, okay, well, how much is it going to be? So I called another local florist, talking about that relationship and the trust.
Yes, right.
He's like, I could put a van together. It was about an hour away. And he's like, we can start making them in the van on the way there.
Wow.
It'll be $1,800. I was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I go back to Dad. Dad says that sounds great. Hindsight, that's why we now have on our contract emergency day credit card for this reason. So I go to the bride and I explain to her, and she said, oh, my God, that is so wonderful. I'm so glad you were able to do all that, blah, blah, blah. So they roll in at like 3:45. Bouquet. So we're like taking them out of the truck van. We're passing them out. We're pinning boutonnieres. We're getting them down the aisle. And then he's driving down to the reception that was a little further down to do the centerpieces. I was like, bring whatever you have. Greenery, whatever, doesn't matter. Oh, here comes florist number 1 pulling in at like 4:15.
Oh my gosh.
Like, wedding's already started.
Yeah.
We don't need you.
Yeah.
Goes on. And so I go to Dad. I can't remember exactly. And Dad was like, I'll get your credit card here in a few. Because I was like, I do need to get the money.
Right.
And at that point, I wanted a credit card. Didn't really want a check or cash, whatever, something. And so, make a long story short, wedding goes off without a hitch. I send florist number 1 back home. We don't need him. We already
too late.
You're done. And he wasn't even prepped. I remember videoing him. He was trying to like wrap the bouquets still
Oh my
together
gosh.
when he got there. And I was like, okay.
Compared to the second one that did it in the van on the
yeah,
way there.
on the way there.
Going the extra mile.
So everything happens. And so it comes the Monday or Tuesday after. And so somehow we ended up with all their stuff back at the office. And I was like, when you come pick up your stuff, we'll just settle up for the flowers. They called and they said, we're on the way, but we're not paying for the flowers. Our florist showed up. I was like, this is a joke, right? This is a big joke. You're not paying me? Yeah, we're not paying because our florist showed up. I said, oh, that's how that works? Okay.
So it just comes out of your pocket.
So I didn't even let them come in the office. I put everything outside of the office, and did not let them come in. I've seen her several times since then. One time I paid for her nails. One time I paid for her dinner. So anytime I see her, I just do something so kind for her.
Yeah. I had a similar one now that you're talking about that. It blows my mind how people think that just it happens like that. Like it just.
So I had to pay $1,800.
Yeah, just out of your
That was the month of package.
Right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and one that I had just real quick, we the cake was late. Like we had talked with them, they're gonna arrive. Similar situation. I think like an hour before ceremony. Well, the way the venue was set up, where the reception was, you could see the ceremony. It was like through windows, so you had to. That's why we specifically told them the time to arrive, so you can't see through the glass when they're trying to deliver this cake. Well, it was some special cake. It was, I don't even remember what it was at the time, but they 3 hours go by, their emergency number on their phone that we continue to call, their cell phone number that they provided us, nothing was even working. At one point, I think we got we're out of the office, see you on Monday. Oh, okay, cool. So I had an assistant ready to go to a Publix to get a cake. It wasn't the specific cake, but something that, because they were during ceremony and they were in cocktail hour, we've got to do something, we got to act quick because they're going to be in here in no time. So we had the assistant literally run into the car to go and grab just whatever cake. We were all calling different floors. Do you have anything just solid white? Not happy birthday, just something, something. Yeah. And here they come rolling in nothing was wrong. And I was like, we've called your emergency number. And she's like, oh, that number's not in service anymore. I was like, oh, okay. Kind of back what you said when you update your stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And they showed up and, but that ended up leading to the maid of honor upset because it was some special wedding cake. I don't even remember what it was, but it's just little things like that nobody even sees behind the scenes that we do.
Nope, and that's why you should hire the people that we recommend.
Right.
We know we're going to show them, do a good job.
Good job, right.
This is definitely a good one. Advice to vendors if they wanted to be on our or another company's list, and how should they do that? So, and I'm sure you've had people reach out to you as well.
I've had quite a few here lately, and what I like to do is... Yes, right.
We'll put them on there.
Yes, for sure. Check that one. What I like to do is kind of do my own little research after they reach out and, just see if it's something, that our clients, one, would be interested in, or two, is the type quality that we like and like to refer to our clients. And, I like to schedule a meeting with different vendors and venues, and specifically here recently I had a venue reach out. Well, it's over 3 hours away, which I would love to go to a tour, but by the time I go there and do the hour walkthrough and then home, that's my day. It's right, one of those things, and it's a beautiful place, and eventually I'll probably will when there's not as busy season, but just specifically things like that, but also back to kind of staying connected with them, and that just growing those relationships, but also keeping their information on file, because you never know when a situation is going to come up where it's I have that person. Right, I can connect this bride with or client with, that specific person. Just for instance, someone I saw just here this last couple of days is looking specifically for a old, I don't even remember what year, Bronco as their exit car. Well, I was like, oh, do I know? But the people I know don't have the Bronco. So it was but just sharing and sending to different people, you never know. They might end up finding someone through different people.
No, absolutely. And also when vendors, reach out to us, they want to be on our list. We recently just had one, and I was like, I really have to work with you. And he's like, well, how am I going to be able to work with you, if you don't recommend me? And I was like, there was something that came about, it was last minute. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity. Yeah. And it was within 2 weeks of the wedding. And And I was like, this will be a good, because I didn't know his quality of work.
Right,
We're
right.
talking lighting things. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure he knew what he was lighting and
Right.
doing, So the client had bulb lights, and it was kind of a Pinterest
Right.
thing. And it wasn't a Pinterest fail. He did an amazing job.
Oh.
It was a lot of work for him.
Yeah.
But it proved to me that, he was able to take what they had, use it, and execute it. You know what I mean?
And that's tough too, because like you said, you don't want to necessarily, even though you might have you might have done your research and, did a meeting with them or met them for coffee or something. You don't know how they're actually going to act on wedding day. I mean, the stress sometimes that different vendors or venues, that's enough in itself. Like, oh, I don't know if we'll work together again.
Right? Yeah. No, for sure. And there's a lot of people that can interview and do well, and then you see them executing in an action. You're like, oh boy.
Or you talk to one person, for instance, the manager. Well, the manager's not even there on the day of the wedding, and they send, so-and-so that's the venue coordinator or whatever. And it's like, oh, well.
Sometimes I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah.
That happened with a band recently. And I swear he didn't communicate one thing to the band leader who's actually announcing. And I'm like, as a business person, it would have been so easy to have that phone call with him on there.
Right, yeah.
Just to listen.
Listen,
Even if you're asking the question and going through everything, at least
just listen,
he heard it.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, no, I agree on that. All right, well, this is probably the biggest thing for vendors and venues, making connections in the industry. What are some ways to get involved?
This has been a huge thing for me in the last year, being in Nashville specifically. A lot of networking events. I mean, I've been to Hills and Handshakes, Whip Up. Both of those are amazing for anybody that's listening. That's in their area.
Yeah.
They're great. And a member of WIPA, and just different little. They have quarterly meetings that is amazing. That's great to go to. But they also have little like seminars, almost like once a month. You have different things, whether it pertains to you or not. Just listening in and the interactions, because you brainstorm, oh, we could use that here. Or that might be good, for this specific case. And just other things is like even the bridal show, I've done now 2 of those, and they have been amazing, meeting different clients, getting our name out there, but also meeting the different vendors and venues.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
that's
huge,
thing.
because it's one of those things where it's every season's different for different areas, but during busy season, at least they're all in one place. You take that extra hour before or after, to connect with people, pass out your business cards, and then follow up with them. And then, just specifically here recently, I've done that with a florist, and I've recommended her to multiple people here lately. And, she's like, this has just been amazing, even though I knew of her and we've connected, but just to meet in person, shake her hand, and, oh my gosh, I remember you from this, and make those connections and, grow from there. And some other ones would just be, meeting vendors for coffee, or, doing a venue walkthrough, or, venue meeting, and just different things like that I've found that just grow in those relationships. And goes back to what we were saying, the communication and checking in with them. And, it all leads to hopefully working together someday, or you referring them or them referring you.
No, absolutely. And I thought about this the other day for you're a year in now, but newer cities that come on, like when they finally work their first wedding, like taking a little something for each of the vendors.
Yes.
Like a cute little bag with some fun little things,
just
so they remember you.
Right, yeah, I did that. I made, can't remember what it was specifically, that I did like a cute little thank you card, and then it might have been a koozie or something, and just like, so they remember it. And I had the photographer just here lately. She's like, you're gonna have to meet me with another one of those koozies. I've used it so much, it's coming apart. So just little things,
things to do that. Obviously bridal expos are big
huge,
too. I know you've done quite a few in Nashville. Obviously the connection to meet couples, but obviously to meet other vendors. And other ways to make connections in the industry is, going to wedding expos, bridal expos. I know you've done quite a few in Nashville as well. We just recently went to Las Vegas for the Wedding MBA, which is, a big, huge connection, lots of vendors, venues, everybody's out there. So if you see any of those in your area, I know they have them in New York, D.C., all kinds of places. It's definitely a good way to.
And even different ones other than, weddings specifically. Like I know here recently I've been looking into different corporate events, because, if you meet the right person and you do one great event for them, it leads to so many more opportunities.
Well, thank you for listening to This Takes the Cake. It's been awesome to have Ash from Nash.
Ash from Nash, that's right.
On the podcast today. Tell them how they can get a hold of you.
You can contact me through my email, which is ashley.huff@studyingandbrainevents.com, or find me on the website, reach out to us on Instagram. Lots of different ways.
So many different ways.
Yes.
So listen to us every Thursday. Go follow us. And until next time. Bye, guys.